Hello, I'm Kiana Jones speaking on the Black Butte mine site of Cottage Grove, Oregon, that now stands as a Superfund site. So what makes this mine site a Superfund site? When did it become one? Well, it became a Superfund site only 15 years ago in March 2010. However, it's long been an issue since its closure in the late 1960s, over 40 years before its enlistment into the National Priorities List. What was the cause of all this? Mercury contamination, starting all the way back to the late 1880s. In 1897, idle mercury was discovered on the mountain of Black Butte, affirming their first mercury shipment only 2 years later. Black Butte Mine was a mercury mining landmark that consisted of ore extracting and crushing it before roasting it and shipping it off. Their mercury was of high value as the average cost of mercury was exceptional back then. However, just when that cost lowered significantly in 1909 by over 30%, the mine was closed, though reopened shortly thanks to the First World War's high demand of mercury. After that, the value of mercury continued to spike and plummet for the next 3 decades with the stock market crash of 1929 and, of course, the Second World War. And well, thanks to that war, overseas imports of mercury were halted, and national industries and sites became more of use for the U.S. as mercury held high importance for the small, developing country. By 1969, Black Butte's reign would come to an end with their final closure. However, this left behind homes inhabited by workers, mining equipment, and of course, that mercury furnace. What did these structures leave behind? Mine tailings, toxic mine tailings surrounding them, which then would be used to construct roads still in existence today. Now, I asked earlier, what made this site become a Superfund site? Well, it was due to the continued unsupervised downstream transportation of mercury into their Willamette River and Cottage Grove Reservoir, just north of their mercury furnace. This contamination caused high levels of mercury within the tissue of the fish inhabiting the reservoir. And what did many people come to the reservoir for? You guessed it, fishing. This detection would come again, yes, again, with a fish advisory issued by the Oregon Health Authority. This wasn't the first time Black Butte was placed under a fish advisory. The first one was in 1979, and the second, 2004, only 6 years before its Superfund enlistment. Now, the source of mercury contamination wasn't believed to be from the mine site's furnace. In fact, up until 2008, they believed it came from volcanic rock and geothermal activity in the upper drainage areas. Upon Furnace Creek, the source's culprit discovery, the EPA and state of Oregon scientists and engineers would form an investigative team and get to work. Scientists would conduct field mappings and screenings of soil and rock for metals. During these field mappings, the locations and conditions of the underground entrances of the mine site were examined, while construction materials were sampled. When it rained, they didn't stop. In fact, the rain favored their evaluations. When a rainstorm would manifest, surface water from Furnace Creek will wash down into the watershed, granting scientists an abundance of methylmercury samples, the more toxic form of mercury. How did the accumulation of this toxic mercury begin? A chemical change called methylation. Non-discriminating microorganisms would consume the mercury and carbon, inevitably combining these two elements to begin the methylation process and create methylmercury, which would continue to reside within the microorganisms. Those microorganisms would then go on to be consumed by small fish, and those small fish would then be consumed by bigger fish. Before, of course, those bigger fish are caught by humans and consumed. So why did it take so long for the EPA? Why did it take so long for true action from the state of Oregon and even the EPA to take part? Simply put, by many, the lack of urgency. No one wishes to waste resources on problems that only have potential. However, it doesn't always work in favor when you wait. Now, Black Butte has a public health concern and strict fish advisory to boot after continued years, even to this day, of excavating.
EPA listed it on what we call the National Priorities List, which is the Superfund list, back in 2010. And we're beginning with our consultant, CDM Smith, to investigate what the impacts of this historic mining operation have been to the environment and what impacts are currently still occurring to the environment. The movement, the transport of contaminants is over a large scale within the watershed here. It's going to be a sort of phased approach that we're going to work through to try and characterize the contamination here, determine the fate and transport of those contaminants into the watershed, and try and assess solutions for that.
The contamination has prompted warnings about consuming fish that are caught in the Cottage Grove Reservoir. The Environmental Protection Agency is now starting the process of cleaning up the mercury at the mine.